Over the last 100 years, VETS has had lots of different iterations. It's had lots of ups and downs over the last 100 years.
The idea that it's possible to be in a business was instilled in the kids early in life.
Having a family business does definitely take a toll on the family.
Sometimes it feels like being on a crazy mountain trail where you're winding back and forth, and at some points you think you might even fall off the mountain.
I worked hard to instill the values of honesty and respect and honor and collaboration, and don't be afraid of making mistakes.
And I'm really proud with how they have put that to work in their own lives.
When we look back at the 4 generations of Rayners who've led the business, they've all had their own unique styles, and they've brought their own unique traits and visions to the business.
My great-grandfather, Fred Rayner, went to World War I to fight. He was injured. And while he was recovering in hospital, he met and fell in love with his nurse, Fanny, and convinced her to come back to Edmonton with him. Even though Fred was trained as a carpenter, he got a job at a place called Barry's Sheet Metal. And one day, Fanny was listening in on the party line and overheard Barry from Barry's Sheet Metal talking about who he might have to lay off, and Fred's name came up. And Fanny piped in and said, "Tell him he quits and send him home." That story for me is very meaningful because, you know, if Fanny hadn't piped in and said something, I don't even know if VETS Sheet Metal would have been founded. Social conscience has always been a part of the VETS story. Fred paid life insurance for the men who worked for him. He also hired war veterans who found it hard to get employment elsewhere because of post-war injuries.
My dad spent time after high school and learning the sheet metal trade and welding. At the end of the war, his brother was sent from Edmonton to find him out in Vancouver and say, "Look, you better get back here or Dad's going to turn the shop over to one of the key employees for $1, and that'll be the end of the Rayner legacy."
When Alan came back to the business and took over, he tried to grow the business and into all kinds of different things. You know, as the business and the economy changed and grew around the business.
He built a new shop. My first crib was in an apartment above the shop. VETS was by that time employing 100 people, and when it was time for him to consider retiring, I got the same kind of an ultimatum that he had gotten. Although I was working in the finance industry, during a round the dinner table discussion, it was made real clear that I should consider strongly making a shift back into the family business. We shifted from hand layout to computerized layout. We shifted from hand cutting of the metals to plasma cutting. We were doing industrial ventilation, dust collection, pollution control, high-rise buildings, schools.
Dad had more of a hands-on approach and had a harder time delegating things. He became the expert, much like Granddad did, but he would go out and learn the things and learn the processes, and then took them on and took on the ownership of those, and had a harder time delegating those things to others to take on and own.
When I received a sudden, at the time, terminal cancer diagnosis, and that Sean and Aaron were informed, they committed to seeing the business continue if I should have died on the operating table.
We were doing what we call our externship. We were in Toronto, both working outside the industry, outside the family business, and a long way from anyone or anything we actually knew. And then we got a phone call, and our dad was sick, and it's time to come back and decide what you want to do and what role you want to play.
When we came back to the business, we had about 18 employees and we did about $2 million a year in revenue. We grew very quickly. Once we did the succession and started removing some roadblocks and addressing some opportunities, we went from 2 million to 3.5 to 6 to 9 in a short order of time.
The funny thing about a succession plan is that it's so good to talk about it, and it's so good to have a plan, even if it's just the big rocks of what if. But when it comes down to enacting the plan, it's generally under some kind of crisis.
Thinking back to our family experience in Roadmap, it provided us with the conversations and the foundation to throw this 23-year-old kid into the deep end. If we hadn't have had some of those talks the way we did around the kitchen table late at night about succession and what I thought I wanted, what I saw in my future, that call from Toronto could have been a whole lot different when Dad was diagnosed with cancer.
Family businesses need support, and that support comes in many ways. It's education, like the Roadmap course. We did the Roadmap course when we were really young. And I remember staying up most of the nights having big discussions about the content brought up in that course.
I'm really grateful that I was given the opportunity, and I attribute it to that, ABFI and Roadmap, and the support that we received.